spinning back to the open side. Karoim Bete, up the goal here to Samu, who's quick. Pete Samu looking for Karoim Bete. Back to Samu. Oh, that is wonderful. That is wild. That is amazing from the Wallabies.
Hello there and welcome to Pick and Drive Rugby. And for all of you, our dear listeners, we have something really special to begin the podcast tonight. This is what you get when you ask ChatGPT to write a poem about rugby union. Amidst the fields of green and gold, where strength and courage do unfold, there stands a game that's pure and true, a sport for all, both old and new. The crunching tackles, fierce and bold, the rucks and mauls that never fold, the scrums that test each team's might, and the tries that bring in such delight. For rugby is more than just a game, it's a way of life, it's a source of fame. So come and watch and join the fray, experience the thrill day by day, for in this sport we find our joy, and in its beauty we all rejoice. What a way to start the pod, Mitch. It is.
That's awesome.
That was brilliant. That was stirring.
You know what? I think we've just found our intro to our World Cup special later in the year. We'll get you to do your deep Nick McArdle voice. You'll read that. We'll get some nice instrumental playing behind. Sorted. Done.
Mate, how gold. And that is just ChatGPT writing it for us. That is a good way. Not only is it making my teaching easier in terms of resource preparation, but it's also writing content for the pod. What a world we live in.
Ando put that in not a minute or two before we hit record. So like that's technology at its finest right there. Well done.
Oh, how good. Now, either way, we are here for you, our dear listeners, with match reviews, player interviews, quality rugby chat, and all of that. So tonight, obviously, I'm Ando. With me is Mitch, and we're going to be going through a Who Am I segment. Our thoughts on round 4 of Super Rugby Pacific. The match of the week, voted by you, our fans, is Brumbies versus Moana and the locker room. So I'm pretty excited to get into that. But Mitch, we do have some Super Rugby tipping that we need to highlight and celebrate the success of our tipsters.
Geez. I mean, I have to fess up here and say before we go through the results that if anyone does follow our socials, they would have seen the tips that I put in last week, and I went with my heart. Not much of my head. Went with my heart and just thought, Aussie rugby's on the up. We've got this, and went with all the Aussie teams bar the Reds, which was a bit controversial in some parts. But I didn't get a single tip right.
In retrospect,
didn't get a single tip right. So that
Are you
hurts
serious?
as an Aussie rugby fan. Yeah, not one.
Oh,
actually, I did. No, I went for the Blues. Yeah, not one right. So no. Anyway,
wow.
To the people that did get their tips right, so well done to. Let me see if I can read this because I'm reading it off the sheet. And Jojo Rabbit or Dan G in first place on 42 points. We then have Banana Splits.
21 points.
Well, what's the number on the side? So we've got 21, 6, and 42.
That's the margin. 21
I've
is
just
the
given
overall
him
points,
a heap
then
more
points this round, and then the margin.
Heaps more points. No. Nick G on 21 points, also with Old Boys or Manjit L, also on 21 points. So it's tied up the top there. Everyone's on the same points, and then it comes into that differential of the match of the week, in which way you've tipped that and how close you were to the final score. So well done to those people. Not well done to me. More likely well done to Ando. And yeah, I guess the tactic of trying to go with the upset this early in the season is not paying off. So that's a shame.
No, I mean, you did kind of like pull out the desperation card a little bit early, but that's okay. So
it's not that I haven't given up. I was just hoping that I had faith actually that there wasn't just going for the desperation. I actually did think that the Force were going to win, and I did back those teams. But anyway.
Fair enough, my friend. Well, as always, we have 2 simple calls to action. Firstly, consider joining our Discord channel to be part of the best Australian rugby community going around. The link is in any of our social media profiles, and the live chats for the games are particularly raucous and entertaining, so make sure that you get involved there. Then lastly, please consider going to www.ko-fi.com/pickanddriverugby, coffee.com, and supporting us with a one-off or a monthly payment. We'd really, really appreciate it. Although we do it for love, not money. Every little bit counts. Now, Mitch, we're moving ahead now to a Who Am I? And I need to ask, how scared are you?
Oh, I'm absolutely. I've got no idea who this is going to be. I'm most likely going to get this wrong. Every time we've done trivia so far this year, I've been well off the mark. So hopefully I can put my best foot forward and show why my credentials for being the host of this podcast or co-host of this podcast. But don't go too hard on me, mate.
It should be all right. It should be all right. So, ladies and gentlemen, playing at home, basically, I'm going to go through who am I. When Mitch is ready to answer it, he can say, oi, oi, and jump in. If you get it before Mitch, know that you have the moral and intellectual superiority over him. And please make sure that you say it on our social media platforms. So get involved there.
Let us know.
Okay. Are you ready, my friend?
I'm ready.
All right, let's go. Who am I? I was born in Auckland, the sixth of 7 children. When I was 6 years old, we moved to Melbourne, searching for new work and opportunities. One of my favourite meals at home was the $5 large chips from the local chippy shop, and that would feed all of us. I started playing rugby at the age of 10. After growing up playing rugby, I made it into the 2006 Under-19 World Cup, and despite the loss of my father to cancer just beforehand, we came away winning this tournament. This was a big part of the reason why I received my first Super Rugby contract in 2007.
Ooh.
I debuted for the Wallabies in the 2013 British and Irish Lions first test, but was knocked out in the opening moments of the match.
Oh, yep. Knocked out. I don't. Okay, I've got a guess, but I think I'm wrong. Okay. I'll go. Nick Styles.
No, my friend. Not in 2013 British and Irish Lions first test. No.
Oh, 13 was it?
2013 is what I said. Yep. So 2013 British and Irish Lions first test, but was knocked out in the opening moments of the match and couldn't continue on the field. I played 150 Super Rugby games for the first of my 2 super teams, scoring 963 points across 12 seasons with that first team. Last year, I was the first Pasifika player to pass 1,000 Super Rugby points with my son running on the tee for the record.
Yep. It's Christian Liliafano.
Well done, my friend. Very well done. I deliberately kept the Brumbies out of there because you would have got it really early. And for those playing at home, no, that's okay. I didn't give you a huge amount before the British and Irish Lions. That was the first clue that I would have expected a few of the listeners to really latch on to. I'll just finish it off anyway. In 2016, I was diagnosed with leukemia, and despite the long and challenging medical journey, I managed to retake the field for the Brumbies in the final game of the 2017 season. And if you hadn't got it by then, I would have disowned you from the podcast. But very well done. Hey, when I was doing a bit of research for that, I came across an awesome video, My Story, Christian Liliafano by Ulster. So when he went over and played in Ireland, they did a video about him and his background and his story, and it's absolutely brilliant. Really, really great videos. So if anybody's got some time, we might chuck it on our socials, but either way, just go to YouTube and Google Christian Liliafano, My Story, and 10 minutes long. Awesome cool. Watch. So anyway, mate, thanks for that. Hope it was enjoyable.
It threw me. The 2006 threw me. So what was that first contract?
So 2006 Under-19 World Cup, and in the following year got his first Super Rugby contract.
Yeah, so 2007. I was like, oh, gee, he's been around for a while, hasn't he then?
Yep.
And when you were saying the Lion series, it cut out a little bit, so I didn't actually get the name, which Lion series it was. So I guess that makes sense.
I was like, Nick Styles, he's a little bit older.
Yeah, no, that's why after I said that, I was like, oh, 13. Of course not. Oh, well. Too late now.
Oh, well. You got it, mate. Second guess, so very well done. So with that done, mate, why don't we move on now into our regular round 4 discussion of the results from this weekend.
Fantastic. So round 4 of Super Rugby did see a lot of action being played. We had a lot of trans-Tasman tests, which we didn't have so much of the last few weeks. So good to be back there to kind of test where Australian rugby is really kind of at. And I think we sit here as rugby fans a little bit shocked in some ways around some of these results. We're probably expecting a little bit closer games, but I'll quickly run through the results and then we might talk about some of the points from one or two of the games. So, and before we do dive into it, our match of the round this week is Brumbies versus Moana Pasifika, so we won't be focusing on that in this section. We'll do that next. But first up was the Hurricanes against the Waratahs. It was a 34-17 victory to the Hurricanes. We then had the Chiefs against the Rebels, 44-25 in that game to the Chiefs. The sort of top of the table clash in Super Rugby Pacific this year, we had the Blues hosting the Crusaders in Auckland. The Crusaders did come away with the Chockies there, 34-28. We then had the match of the round, which was the Brumbies and Moana Pasifika, 62-36 to the Brumbies there. Then on Sunday afternoon, we had the Highlanders hosting the Western Force. Highlanders too good for the Force in that game, 43-35. And then the final game of the round was played on Sunday afternoon in Queensland. The Queensland Reds hosting the Fijian Drua, 27-24. So I guess we'll start with the first game of the round, Ando, the Hurricanes and the Waratahs. What are your sort of thoughts around that game and the result?
Yeah, look, it's really disappointing because I think the result in some way papers over a little bit of the Waratahs' quality of play. So Langy Gleeson's 74th minute try really was against a run of play intercept from a Jordie Barrett short pass. So it should have in some ways finished 34-12, and that would have been a pretty fair representation of the game. The Waratahs in large parts were fairly poor, lots of unforced errors, passes that were missing the players. Just defensive effort didn't seem to be there, which is something that's pretty worrying and really not something I would have thought of a Darren Coleman coach team. There seemed to be a lack of urgency, a lack of continuity between players. Really, really poor to watch. Disappointing is probably a better way. Disappointing. That's not to say the players weren't trying, but there were just way too many unforced errors for a team that was meant to be kind of pushing in the top half of the table. And now they come away 1 from 4, and things do not get any easier this week against the Chiefs at home.
Yeah, and in saying that, there's a bit of an injury toll that's come out of that game. So at the current time, we know that Mosesi Tuipulotu, who had his but starting or debut for the Waratahs, did get a knock to his knee, so he's out for a number of weeks. We've got Lalakai Feketa. They're the names that come to mind at the top. The injury list for the Waratahs does sort of stretch forward a little bit as well from this game. So it's going to
gamble as well.
There's definitely going to sort of stretch the team's capabilities going forward. But if we then shift across to some of the other games in the round, was there any game in particular that really jumped out to you, or any points that you wanted to talk about?
Oh, look, I think if you're looking for the best game across the entire weekend, including the Kiwi teams, you can't go any further than the Blues Crusaders. So the Crusaders were this was just an incredible game, some amazing tries all round. Look for Lester Fainga Anuku, I think it was his second try. The Crusaders get a turnover in their own 22. The ball goes out to Richie Mo'unga, who you would expect to do a clearance kick, and then he does a cross-field kick, which bounces over the head of Tuivasa-Sheck for the Blues, and Fainga Anuku is able to kind of get up high, bring it down, and run the length of the field. It's already a contender for try of the season within the entirety of the competition. It was absolutely brilliant. Look, it was that was just a star-studded game, really great rugby all around. And I mean, the Crusaders came away winning by 6 points, but on another day, the Blues could have easily come away with the win. So I think it just shows the quality amongst the top teams. It's actually quite close. So I think the Chiefs, the Blues, the Crusaders, and the Brumbies are all in and about the same level in terms of the quality of the performance that they're capable of putting out there. So that was a great game to watch. And for any neutrals out there, go and watch that match.
Yeah, for sure. And I think in the final sort of 5 minutes, there was a few calls that could have gone either way, and potentially with the game on the line. So I think there's fans in both parties that are sitting here feeling like that game was up until the final play was up for grabs. So it's one of those nail biters to definitely go back and watch. If we focus just now on the Chiefs, the Rebels, and the Highlanders and Force, there's kind of a similar theme that came out of both of these games, in that both of the Aussie teams started really strong and had really good minutes early on in the half. But it only took between 5 to 10 minutes for the teams to kind of be off for whatever reason, whether it's through injury, losing players, or just sort of switching off mentally for a few minutes, and the score blew out really quickly. that Rebels and Chiefs game, the Rebels got to quite a strong start and came off and were pushing the Chiefs really, really strongly. Reece Hodge got injured, came off, and then within the space of 5 or 10 minutes, the Chiefs scored like 3 tries. And then from that point, they were kind of just chasing the game. And quite similar, the Force were in the game for large parts and were hanging with the Highlanders, sort of faltered in and out of the game. Like they were leading, they sort of let the Highlanders get away. They started to chase them down. And then through ill discipline, gave away a yellow card. And from that point, the Highlanders just pushed on. So disappointing, but I guess again it goes to show in Super Rugby Pacific you need to be on against these Kiwi teams for the whole 80 minutes. You can't switch off at all because they can punish you.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Chiefs and Rebels game and what the Chiefs score in the 34th, 37th, 42nd, and 45th minute. Now, to the Rebels' credit, they also score in the 39th minute, but just that blitz on either side of halfway, we talk about it all the time. It gets boring having to say, oh yeah, championship minutes either side of halfway. But the Chiefs were just so ruthless within that moment. One thing that I found pretty interesting in terms of the Highlanders and Western Force is when I saw the team list for the Force, I was like, who the hell is Gareth Simpson? I had absolutely no idea who he was. And then when I looked him up, I realised I had heard the name before because he has played fair bit of rugby over in England for Worcester Warriors before they folded. So he was brilliant. He did a nice little dink over the top for who was it that went in for the try? For maybe Feluai or Juster to go over. I can't remember who it was. But yeah, he just showed that he actually adds something different into that with a nice little short kicking game, and he played pretty well on debut for the Force. So that was an interesting addition. But I think that I guess the good thing is that the Force, they didn't get blown away playing Kiwi team away, but you also need to recognise this is the Highlanders, who up until this match had been pretty poor throughout the season.
Yeah.
So, I mean, no Kiwi team away is an easy proposition whatsoever. Force will take a lot of positives from this, but if they were really pushing to make that kind of top 8, they should be trying to get the scalps of the Highlanders in particular.
Definitely. And just back on the scrum half for the Western Force, there's a great article that was put out by Nathan Williamson this week for rugby.com.au, sort of explaining where he's been, and that Simon Cron had spoken to him around Christmas time, and sort of he was then playing for Saracens, or was in the Saracens setup over in the Premiership, and they spoke and said, look, come over, we might need you this year as injury cover. And so he's been over in the West training and learning the systems on a sort of trial training contract, and then they've given him a full-time contract with some of the injuries they picked up through the trials, and so he's now officially in the Force and got his debut this week.
Yep. And the other thing is that Reece Hodge's injury is quite significant. Tendons, bone came out of the skin, so it's a compound fracture. So he's having to have surgery and is going to be out for a fair while. So that's quite significant.
Was that a finger injury?
Yeah, finger injury. So
because I saw him come off and I saw him in a sling, and I wasn't sure if it was shoulder.
Yeah. No, definitely finger. But just sticking on that game for a moment more, massive shout out to Carter Gordon. He was again excellent. I think he is probably the form fly half of the competition, and he is just going from strength to strength. Yeah. Oh yeah. We're an Australian podcast talking about the Australian side of things. Okay. But when we tie it back into our earlier conversation about kind of Wallabies prospects who may well be on the plane moving forward, I think that the fact that he's playing at the Rebels and lacks a lot of Wallabies players inside and outside of him is really going to count against him in my mind. So if it's a toss of the coin between, say, him and Lolasiu as maybe the younger fly halves, I think Noah's going to be picked every day of the week.
One thing exciting about Carter Gordon is he needs to be playing Australia A this year, and he needs to play every minute he can for Australia A, and I think that will get him up to speed and ready with the programs, with that step up in fitness and physicality of the international game, particularly if they do. I don't know if they are playing that Pacific Nations series again this year due to the World Cup, but if they were to play it, or there were some tests, we haven't officially reconfirmed whether Australia A is able to play tests this year, but if they do, it'd be a good opportunity for him.
Yeah, good shout. Well, were there other games we needed to cover? Oh, Reds versus Drua. We haven't said anything about that. What was your take on this game, mate? It was a really weird one where the Reds seemed to be in control and then they just let the Drua back into it with 3 late tries, 53rd, 65th, and 71st minute to kind of challenge them again.
Yeah, the Reds did look good in large parts of this game, and I don't think you can necessarily say that the Reds took their foot off the gas at all. I think we're starting to see that this Drua team is starting to get that fitness in the legs and able to put in those 80-minute performances now, and that teams uh, need to be aware that they're going to run them down. One thing that we've spoken about, and every person playing a Fijian team in the world, other than probably Sevens, expects, is that the Fijians can usually put in a good 60 minutes, and then they just don't have that match fitness to sort of see off games in that 80 full 80 minutes. And so that's something that we're starting to see through the regular inclusion in Super Rugby, that they are starting to do that. Last week, they chased the Crusaders down. They got the victory in the last minute of the game, and then this week they came home strong against the Reds. So no team can overlook this Drua team anymore. And I think they're showing that on their day and in their conditions, when they can play the sort of football that they want to, dry, hot conditions, throw the footy around, they can put any team under pressure. And that's what they did this week.
Yep, good shout. I think watching this game, it was pretty hard to kind of get too enthused about it, just because there were some really consistent handling errors from both teams. It was a pretty stop-start match. The run meters across the entire match were really low compared to what we've seen in Super Rugby over the last few weeks. And there were some moments of quality from both teams. Some of the tries that were scored, Josh Fluke in particular was really, really strong. And Ravovo's try off a really nice counter-attack, quick tap off Frank Omani, I think, before he then spread it wide. And Ravovo went into the corner. It was just, for my mind, the Reds just weren't able to take control of the game within the final 20 minutes. And I was actually really concerned when James O'Connor came off and Tom Liner came on, because it just seemed like the Reds were playing with an up-tempo and loose way of holding onto the ball, not willing to just put it back into the corners, get into the set piece, and try to pin the Drua back within their half. I just felt like they were playing into the hands of the Drua rather than them trying to control the game by slowing it down, going to set piece, which is a strength more so of the Reds than the Drua.
Yeah, and Harry Wilson mentioned in the post-match that it was so humid and hot on the field that the ball was like a cake of soap, and that every time you touched it, you basically nearly dropped it. And so that's why that, along with some of the refereeing decisions, no disrespect to the referees at all, but I think there was something like 63 penalties given or something in this game. It was maybe
it's a little bit
high.
There were 33.
33. Yeah, I've doubled that. I thought it was 33.5 for some reason in my head. Anyway, 33 penalties given, and it didn't allow this game to flow. It was so stop-start with players dropping the ball, with like every kind of phase in this game ended up in a penalty. So it was just both teams, I think, were getting a little bit frustrated with that, not able to get a flow going. The heat was sapping the players down. So overall, I mean, it's still a good spectacle. I'd still recommend go back and watch this game if you can. But I don't think the Reds will be happy they got the win, but I don't think they'll be happy with the way they finished that game off.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Fair enough.
Cool. Shall we move now into our match of the week?
I would love to, mate. I would love to. So how do you want to run this?
Well, so for those listening along at home, we are doing the match of the week, which is the Crusaders. What am I talking about? I'm even looking at them. The Brumbies and Moana Pasifika down in Canberra. 62-36 was the final score. Now, I've not been able to watch the full game, so I've just been able to go through the mini, which was quite extensive for a mini this week. I think it came in at like 32 minutes, which sort of definitely blows out that 20-minute mark. But a lot of tries scored. Defense, somewhat optional in this game. Very exciting rugby. A lot of free-flowing ball in contrast to the game in Queensland later in the weekend. What were your initial thoughts of this game?
Yeah, this was a really entertaining game, and I think that a lot of it comes down to the fact that Moana were just unwilling to lay down and accept the kind of dominance of the Brumbies, but they also had the capacity to exploit mistakes from the Brumbies and just run the length of the field and get a try. Like the opening try to Miracle Failangi in the second minute was just a brilliant pick up off the loose ball and just runs the length of the field. So he was just incredible throughout the game. And
It
then
wasn't
you
even a
had
loose
some.
ball; it was an intercept.
Oh, sorry, it wasn't intercept. I was
Yeah.
I was thinking Ndolo's try for some reason. His pick up
Yeah.
there.
Anyway. Yeah.
But yeah, Failangi's early try kind of set the template before Motunga went over in the 9th minute as well, and things were looking pretty dangerous for the Brumbies early on. But they worked their way back into the game. Moana stayed in touch with them until around about the 50th minute of the match, where the game just turned, and from that point onwards, it was essentially one-way traffic for the Brumbies.
One thing I was really impressed with by Moana Pasifika is that they had definitely done their homework in preparation for this game, and they were implementing things in the set piece and then just generally in play that was really exploiting some of the, and I guess I won't call them weaknesses of the Brumbies, because this team has shown so far this year that they don't have many weaknesses, but maybe some of the areas that are open to be exploited, and Moana Pasifika did that. So that second try to the number
So
7
good. To
is a maul
Motunga.
try. And how often do we see a maul try conceded by the Brumbies, particularly 9 minutes into a game? But what Moana Pacifica did really well is that they sort of executed 2 pods. Like they know that the defensive structures of the Brumbies are so strong that as soon as that player comes down hits the ground, they're just going to drive them backwards. So what they did is when they went up, they threw to a second pod in the front of the line out, and the forwards all attached to the second pod out the back of the line out and pushed them, which then meant that there was hardly any defense there for that first front pod, which then just drove over and scored the try. So that was really like a clinical play that is well done. We don't often see scored against a team like the Brumbies.
Yeah, and it just showed throughout the game that although Moana really struggled in their own maul D against the Brumbies, and Luke Roma went over for a couple of tries that I think Connell McInerney will be hunting him down to gain a recompense for.
Look, that's
Moana at the same time
my
were
spot, mate. Get out of there.
Yep, get out. Moana were still able to basically come away with a couple of more tries of their own against the Brumbies, and some tight in tries, which you don't see come very often against Moana, so against the Brumbies. So that was really impressive. But I mean, you look at this game and you see the capacity of the Brumbies to play different styles of rugby depending upon the needs of the moment. So they do have the capacity to go over for more tries. They do have the capacity to bash against the line and get away over multiple phases. But at the same time, some of the backline attacks in the final 20 minutes, some of the set piece plays, Andy Muirhead had a blinder, finally saw Corey Toole in space, and dear God, he must be the fastest man in Super Rugby Pacific at the moment. He was just absolutely incredible. Who would be genuinely? Who do you think would be faster than him? Maybe it's his acceleration that's the fastest, but I'm not sure there would be many people faster.
I feel like Richie Moe's pretty fast when he gets going.
Yeah. Maybe I wonder if there's actually any data on that. That'd be fun to contact the clubs and be like, "Hey."
I did see a tweet by Sean Maloney this morning asking that, and I didn't see the results of it, but yeah, I do wonder. Lord Laurie commented on someone's tweet that Toole got up to 10.01 in terms of, I guess, pace, whatever that means. I mean, like, maybe that's the time for running 100 meters, 10 seconds, which is fast. That's really fast.
Yeah, I'm just quickly reading through. Oh, he's just asking questions. Come on, Shawnee, give us some answers, mate. Oh, let's get him. That's disappointing. But in terms of the rugby itself, I mean, this was brilliant. A couple of other points that I really enjoyed from this were watching Tom Wright come in from 15 and direct a bit of the play sometimes as a playmaker. He's really growing in that role, and so that's good to see him add those strings to his bow rather than just being a bit of a finisher or a strike runner. But in addition to that, Andy Muirhead is, in my mind, the most underrated player in Super Rugby. He cops a fair bit of crap from people, just in terms of wondering why he got Wallaby's selection, but he's consistently been one of the Brumbies' top try scorers and best, just most consistent players over the last few seasons. And I just think he is such a quality servant for Australian rugby in terms of the intelligence of his play. Rarely dies with the ball, usually makes the right pass, usually sticks his tackles, and is actually decent over the ball for a player who's not actually that large.
And he pops up
So,
like
yeah,
his
he was
work
just
rate
brilliant.
as well. He's not just the type of
Yep.
winger who stands on the wing and finishes things off. Like, yes, he does do that and he does that well. He scores tries that he shouldn't really be scoring, bit like Max Jorgensen down at New South Wales. But he also goes looking for the ball in the midfield and plays that sort of distribution role as well. Like, he's the kind of player that you just, as a defender, you don't know what he's going to do. Like, you can't really anticipate what his next move is because he's not necessarily just going to be that player. If he pops up in the midfield with the ball, he's not just going to take the line on. He'll also distribute it out the back and feed off his other backs and put other people into holes as well. So he's that type of player that puts defenders in sort of second guessing what he's going to do when they come into contact with him. And he's so nimble and able to step around players too that he creates space for not only himself but the players around him.
Yep. Ryan Lonergan, 50th cap. Who else did we have? We had Charlie Cale come on for his debut. Ben O'Donnell had his first try for the Brumbies as well. I think Jack Wright, was that a debut for Jack Wright as well? So you have a few players that are really coming through the ranks, but how good is it that the Brumbies can be bringing on Ryan Lonergan and Jack Debrasini at the 55th minute to replace Nick White and Nola Lasiu, and just trust that they have the experience and the skills to bring the game home.
Well, that's the thing that I guess one weakness or downside of the Brumbies for the last few seasons has been their depth at 10. That Noah Alessio was kind of the man, and if he got injured, there was a fair big gap between him and the next player. So now it's fantastic to see that Debrasini or Alessio, either player, I mean, they both bring different things when they're playing, but you can comfortably, as a Brumbies fan, know that when either of those players comes on, there's not going to be a lot of difference in quality. And the game style might shift a little bit. I think Debrasini tends to attack the line a little bit more than Noah, but he doesn't do things worse. He doesn't have a worse pass. He doesn't have a worse kick. Like, that's, I think, overall for this Brumbies team at the moment is what's so interesting, I guess, as a fan of Australian rugby of a different province, is that no matter who it is, players coming in for their debut, they look good. They know the system. They know what they need to do. They know the style of play that they need to do. They do their jobs. The Brumbies have just broken the style of rugby down into just such small little incremental things. Do this, do it well, and that's all you need to do. And the wider sort of game plan takes care of itself. And so when these players come in, they look like superstars and they look like really established players, which we don't necessarily always see in Australian rugby.
And I mean, you just look at the squad and the broader squad, you've got players like Tom Ross, who is on the bench as a prop. And yet he's been with the Brumbies for 4 years now, and he's only 24. So it just shows that you're bringing on a player who doesn't have a huge amount of Super Rugby experience. He's played 30 games. 30 games, so that's not horrible. But at the same time, you're bringing on this younger player who knows what to do because he's been at the club for 4 years. And over that time, they've been giving him incremental minutes and just little bits of the game here and there to get him up to speed with the requirements of super level rugby. But with one thing we haven't mentioned is that Lenny Ikitau was withdrawn right before the game. And so you had Tamati Tua starting at 12 and Ollie Sapsford at 13. And they stood up. They were good. Ollie Sapsford, for me, is someone that's really had an opportunity to show more this season than what we've seen previously. And Tamati Tua is obviously benefiting from the loss of Simone overseas, and he has been really impressive both in attack and D, just in the quality of his defensive hits. I'm just thinking about the big hits that I see, but also his attacking play has been really pleasing. He's been running good lines, got decent distribution game as well. So yeah, it's another one of those things, like you were mentioning, that when you lose a player, others step up, and Tua and Sapsford have done that over the last couple of weeks.
It would be really interesting to chat to someone at this point in the season that's involved, whether it's a coach or a player, and we might try and get on that and get that done for our fans in the next few weeks. But what it seems to be at the Brumbies at the moment, around that point, is that these players come in and they don't have to worry about doing their job. And that frees them up to just play rugby. And so when we look at other provinces, when we look at Queensland, when we look at New South Wales, we look at the Tars, for example, Ben Donaldson this week shifted from fullback into fly half. And we were expecting him to come in and have an impact and sort of change up the style. We were hoping that he would unlock the centres a little bit more. He would feed the outside backs more so than Tane Edmund was doing. But he didn't do that. And not to say that Edmed has been playing bad, but Donaldson didn't come in and put in a bigger performance or a better performance this week than Edmed had. And so these players, whatever the system is that DC is doing at the moment, I feel like the players that are coming into these positions are just so focused on doing their job right and doing what they need to do that they're not able to really look at the wider game plan. And the Brumbies don't have that. And the players that come in, like Ben O'Donnell when he came in, he's playing expansive rugby. He's popping up where he needs to. He's playing 7 style in a way on the 15-man field. So these players just have that freedom and that ability to play the style of rugby that they can and they instinctively do without having to worry too much about the nitty-gritty.
Yep. Good shouts. Well, mate, that's all I kind of wanted to talk about with the Brumbies. Really entertaining game. Brumbies came away with it in the end. Watch the post-match presser afterwards and watch Nick White be irrelevant for the vast majority of the conversation because Bernie just answered everything. So that was fun.
That's not the first time that's happened. Look, I don't want to end this on a bit of a query. I've got a question that I picked up watching this game. And so I don't know whether it's an interpretation that's changed in the first 3-4 rounds of Super Rugby this year, but I can remember sitting and watching particularly the Reds and the Waratahs trial game in Narrabri, and there was a number of penalties to both teams at line-out time, particularly when they went from line-out to maul, for the pillars or the lifters getting in front of the ball carrier. It was something, and I don't know whether that was just a law trial that they were trialing in those trial games, but there was a number of times where they were pinged and said that you can't be in front of the ball carrier. Like you can't get in between the defensive players and the ball carrier. There was 3 tries the Brumbies scored this week, particularly Nick Frost, when he stepped into the space between the defenders and Caden Neville with the ball. And it wasn't pinged. And Luke Reimer scored 2 of those tries. So I'm just wondering whether that's something that's changed, whether that particular game in Narrabri was a trial and this is what we're looking at, but we're not bringing in for Super Rugby, or it's just something that for whatever reason wasn't adjudicated this week.
Yeah, it's a good question. Good question. My initial thought around it would ask, I wonder if the letting that go is more in line with the desire to increase the speed of the game and place more fatigue on players for latter parts of the match. That would seem likely to me. That decision, I thought at the time, was just a bit pedantic. I'm like, yeah, come on. I mean, there's so many other things that goes on in a line-out maul as well.
In the maul.
It's just that little bit pedantic. But, I mean, it's one of the laws, so I can understand if the ref does call it. I wonder if it's just, let's get rid of it and focus on faster rugby, or let's ignore it and focus on faster rugby.
Yeah. No, it's just something I noticed in this game that like the Brumbies are known for their mauls and have scored so many points off their mauls. Not so much this season. This game, I think, is the first game we've seen them rely on their maul a lot more. Not that they scored all their tries through it, but in previous years, yes, that was kind of their set piece that they would go to and score a lot of their points. But yeah, just an interesting observation.
Yep, good shout. Well, mate, that brings us to the end of our recap of the match of the round. So should we now jump ahead into the locker room?
Let's go.
In the locker round, we've had a bunch of questions come through. Mitch, we have had one late submission come on, which I've just put on the run sheet. Not sure if there's anything we can do about it at this late stage. But the first question has come in from Ben van der Linden. We did ask for their thoughts and people's opinions about kind of New Zealand versus Australian rugby. New Zealand sides punish mistakes and are kings of converting pressure into points. Game managers always seem to step up to make sure their team's bad patches are short, 5 minutes compared to the Aussies' 10 minutes, or so on and so forth. Thoughts on that one, mate? Do you think that those are some of the key differences between the Aussie and the Kiwi teams?
I think we've also just, yes, definitely, that Ben's right in that regard, that the mistakes and the periods of mistakes the New Zealand's make is a lot different and smaller to the Aussies. But I also think that comes back to the depth and the experience that we have, particularly in the fly half position in Australia. Like outside of maybe Brumbies and the Reds at the moment, they've got two experienced fly halves. If you qualify Debrasini as an experienced fly half, James O'Connor and Debrasini, those two. Everywhere else relatively has young fly halves. Carter Gordon, Tane Edmed, Ben Donaldson, Will Harrison, who's playing 10 at the moment for the Force. Hamish Stewart,
Hegarty.
if he's
Hegarty.
there. I mean, Bryce Hegarty, but I don't know if he's like. I think it comes down to the experience and the when you look at the New Zealand conferences and the teams that they've got experience in that position.
Yep. Real good shout. Okay, question from Jock Cudmore, comment. Should be a majority Brumbies Wallabies squad this year. It's daylight between them and the next best Australian team. Best we can hope is that the cohesion can take us deep this World Cup. The Reds' discipline is terrible. The Rebels and Force haven't got a killer instinct, and the Tars are misfiring. Which I think on all those points, that's fair enough. I think it's going to be mostly Brumbies Reds within a Wallaby squad. That would make sense to me. Your thoughts on that one?
I think, again, it comes down to, and what we sort of spoke about earlier in our preview of the game, or our review of the game, was that the Brumbies have such a good structure at the moment that everyone in the squad knows what they need to do. And so does that necessarily translate into the Wallabies? I don't know. We've lost that intel that we had. We don't have Dan McKellar involved. We don't have Laurie Fisher anymore. So I do wonder if Eddie is now looking at just pure talent and how he can style a gameplay around the players that he picks. From a cohesive point of view, though, it should be the Brumbies.
Yep. Yeah, without a doubt. They're clearly the best team within Australian rugby at the moment. Now, moving on to Hugh Tyndall. He sent a couple of questions in. So he has kind of responded to the first question. What were the highlights of the weekend? First up, the Brumbies and Moana Pasifika Tri-Fest versus the Blues and Satyrs slugging it out. Completely agreed. He thinks that Nick Frost will be the first pick to lock, even with all of our players available. Interesting shout. Definitely one of the most talented, probably the most natural athlete out of our locks. He does offer kind of that all-round role in comparison to
how
some
many
of the other
charge
locks
downs
that are
has he
available.
got now? Like, he's just, you don't say
Many
that
to
by
his
other
name.
locks, really. Many
to his name. And he claims that New Zealand sides are so bloody good because they have the depth off the bench and a third tier, which helps create the former depth off the bench. So very well said. It seems entirely unlikely as every day progresses. Australia A, is that the way forward? What are we going to be doing to increase our Super Rugby squad's depth?
Super Rugby A or Super Rugby Australia, whatever you want to call it, it needs to be played. Once the Australia A program starts, and if that's doing its own thing, you've got the Wallabies next in line playing Australia A. The Australian Super Rugby provinces need to be playing each other. If that's just a one round thing, that's fine, but we need to be doing something.
Yep, good shout. So during that window where the Wallabies players are off overseas, and you get the kind of academy teams with the remaining non-international Super Rugby players to play a short competition against each other. Love it. Now, Hugh T also asks, what happened to #Year of the Tar? I'll quickly respond to that, and then you can jump in afterwards with a couple of quick thoughts. A couple of things happened. Injuries happened. The lack of a lock happened as well. We already knew that going into it. And then Hannigan and Sinclair got injured. Plus, I think we put too much stock on the Brumbies match, which is always going to be a hard game. And it seems like the teams really struggled to get up again after that early loss within the season, and quite a significant match. So they're now 1 from 4 with a really tough game against the Chiefs to come. Mitch, what happened to the Year of the Tar?
Yeah, I think injuries, as you said, that's massive. Injuries or player unavailability. I think Kurtley Beale's non-selection has really thrown a spanner in the works for DC's plans. I also just think whatever the game plan is, it's not evident to us fans sitting and watching the game. Like, it doesn't feel like there's a goal or a sort of structure that the Waratahs are playing to. So whether the players just aren't up to playing that style, or the style isn't matching the new set of rules or laws this year. I don't really know what it is. There was a lot of emphasis in the off-season about getting big and bulky and strong to sort of really push those New Zealanders around. But the new laws in play this year have sort of negated that physicality and sort of have relied on players being nimble and fast and spreading the ball wide. And that's something that I think the Waratahs aren't doing well at the moment. So whether the preparation in the off-season wasn't great, whether the game plan isn't suiting the style or the ability of the current players and the playing crew that we've got, it doesn't, everything at the moment doesn't seem to be clicking.
Yep. Well, let's just quickly run through the injury list for the Waratahs. And this is coming from the Draft Rugby casualty ward, so get around it. Charlie Gamble came off with what looked like a partial dislocation, so could miss 4 to 6 weeks, depending upon the severity. Lalakai Foketi came off at halftime with a shoulder injury, not sure of the severity at that point in time. Tane Edmed suffered a back injury, no word on how severe it is. Mosisi Tuipulotu, low-grade MCL tear, hopefully back by round 8. Langy Gleeson may not be available this week because of a knee complaint. Max Jorgensen has an ongoing shoulder niggle, and the team's trying to treat him really carefully because he's 18. Nemani Nadolo,
And a freak,
he came off with a
so
knee injury.
bloody good.
Yep, he came off with a knee injury after 60 minutes. We might well have Dave Parecki, Teddy Wilson, Jed Holloway, Will Harrison, Dylan Peach, and Joey Walton back from injury, hopefully. And I mean, ongoing injury list. We've also got.
Doesn't Will Harrison have a toe injury from last week?
Let me quickly jump back up to where that was. Likely back. Will Harrison. Yeah, he's touch and go from his toe injury.
Okay.
So he might be available, but maybe not. And ongoing injuries, Hugh Sinclair's gone for the next 2 months, and Archer Holtz has a rib injury, and then you obviously have Angus Bell, who's like out for the season. So you're right, injuries haven't helped. And when you know how we looked at the Brumbies before and gave an example of Tom Ross, 30 cap player, 4 years, still only 24 years old. We just don't have that level of player kind of coming off the bench, somebody that's been with the club for 4 years and has kind of 30 caps. Who have we got coming off the bench? We've got maybe Archer Holtz, who's probably got like 15 or 16 caps. We've got Tolu Watu. Actually, he's obviously quite experienced, but outside of that, we've got players that have just joined the squad over the last year or two and are really lacking in Super Rugby experience. So, yeah.
We've got certain, and we don't need to talk all Waratahs at the moment, but we've got certain positions in the team that we don't have a lot of depth in, and other positions where we do have a lot of depth. I think the answer to all of this, Ando, is you and I need to start hitting the hills, mate. We might be getting a call up this week. We might be putting on the shorts and the socks to face the Chiefs. You take Mackenzie and I'll just hide out the back. How does that sound?
That sounds absolutely brilliant. They do need a lock, and I suit a lock slightly more than you do. A little bit taller.
I'll end up in the front row, unfortunately, and just get absolutely folded.
You will. Yep. I mean, look, just touching on it, Sateki Latu, Daniel Botha, like Harrison Goddard, Nasisi Tuipulotu, coming off the bench. They're just players that don't have the experience yet and haven't been around a team for very long. So no wonder the squad isn't going well, because we just don't have that depth of experience currently. And we spoke about how the year of the tar was premature. People were hyping it up way too early. We were thinking it could be a good season, but we're a couple of injuries away. And what's happened? We've got the injuries to some of our key players. Like the fact that Jorgensen and Nadolo have been playing like 80 minutes over the last few weeks just shows how much we miss like James Ram, Dylan Peach because of his injury, Alex Newsom leaving as well. Like we would kill to have Nobby Newsom back at the moment just to be that solid, dependable player that you can count on.
And realistically, I think Darren Coleman's plan was for Kurtley Beale to be the fullback. And for Nadolo and to Jorgensen wasn't even meant to play big minutes this year. He was meant to develop under Kurtley Beale and to come on later half of the year when he's had a full sort of season of training against men to come on and get that experience at fullback or on the wing. Nadolo was meant to be an impact player. Neither of those players were meant to be getting this amount of minutes by round 4 of the season. So the fact that we have lost, we've now Beale's no longer available for selection, and Jorgensen's now injured. Edmed is out injured too, so that means Donaldson has to play fly half. If Harrison's not back, I really don't know who we select at fullback this week. It's a legitimate problem.
Good questions. Very good questions. If we both have Edmed and Harrison out, then it's going to be tough. But if either one of those two are available, you just push Donaldson back into 15.
Yeah, but if they are, what do we do?
Yeah,
Teddy
good question.
Wilson.
We'll have to just see who's back from injury and take it from there. But let's move on. Otherwise, we're just going to turn this into a Tars pod. Tars pod. We've got two more things. Number one, firstly, congratulations to Ireland for the Grand Slam victory in the Six Nations. Very well deserved. Number one team in the world. They are playing some excellent rugby. So it's going to be wonderful to watch them bomb out in the quarterfinals at the World Cup later in the year. So that's going to be entertaining. But if you haven't had a chance to catch up on Freddie Stewart's red card, did you catch this, Mitch? Did you see this?
I've seen the footage of the red card, not the full game.
Yeah, great. Yeah, cool. So basically, Hugo Keenan, the Irish fullback, he is receiving the ball in a backline play, and he kind of like the ball either hits the ground or he drops it in front of him. The ball goes to the ground in front of him, and he's leaning forward, bending over, trying to pick up the ball. So he ducks himself into contact. Freddie Stewart's coming on, he's lining him up for the hit, and then sees Keenan kind of bending over, falling over within a process of trying to get the ball, and he tries to pull out of the tackle, and he doesn't make an attempt to actually make a tackle, and he ends up kind of hitting him side on as he's tried to in the last moment get out of the way, and Jaco Piper's gone ahead and given Freddie Stewart a red card for it, which has strongly divided the social media world, as any topic always does. So just really quickly, what's your 20-second take on this? Should it have been a red card? Do you think Piper got it correct?
Yes. Red card, direct head contact, drop shoulder, leaning into the contact. It's all seconds, but I still don't know what Freddie Stewart was going to do had the fullback actually picked the ball up, because he's not in a position to make a tackle either. If he comes at him, if he continues through with the run, he's going to hit him with a cocked shoulder anyway. So he's not in a position to make a tackle. He's not come in a safe way. He needs to do more, in my opinion. So I'm happy with it being a red card.
All right. And I'll just, for the fun of it, I strongly disagree with you, but that's okay. Because I think the time that Freddie Stewart has since he when he sees can drop the ball, he tries to pull out of the tackle, which is the thing that makes him stand up. He would have been able to commit a regular tackle if he had thought that it was going to be a continuation of play or something like that. And basically, in my mind, it's just one of those unfortunate rugby incidents that happens, and I don't actually consider it to be foul play. I think it's just unlucky. But in any case, let's move on, because we did have one final question that I'm going to read out from Super Rebels Rugby, who asks or says, if I haven't missed the boat, what's the best away game experience in the comp? I'm pretty sure it's Lautoka for the Fijian Drua. If you can get over to Fiji for any of their home games, ladies and gentlemen, just go. It would be absolutely incredible.
Or Suva.
And Mitch,
either of the two.
Where would you love to go to watch a game away?
It hasn't happened yet, but Moana Pasifika is due to play, I think it's the Rebels off the top of my head, but I could be wrong. They're due to play in Samoa, Apia, later in the year. So that's going to be fantastic, because not only is it Samoa, there'll be Tongan fans and Fijian fans, and everyone will be there. That's the place to be. 100% Fiji is the place to be at the moment, because I've seen it. Crowds going off. I expect Apia to be going off for Moana Pasifika later in the year as well. So that's where I would want to be.
Fair enough. And then I'll answer the final question. Which city has the best Super Rugby nightlife or rugby bars and pubs? I will just say that I think that Caxton Street in Brisbane is pretty up there in terms of the quality of pre and post match opportunities. That would be absolutely wonderful. I haven't had the chance to do it. I've just heard so much from people who have. That would be brilliant to go and catch a game there. So make sure you get involved and send in your best rugby experiences and places pre and post match to catch up. Particularly, I'd love to hear about any establishments in and around the major cities where the teams are that are just rugby havens, places that you can go and watch rugby union games and have a good crowd of union supporters there with you. Because at the place that I was at on Saturday night, I had to I had to make friends with the Pasifika security guard and get him to help me sway the people to put the Super Rugby on the TV. And the two of us were standing there chatting, watching it, which was good fun. So if
one
you
thing
do
I want
know
to
of any
say before we
places-
finish up, one thing I do want to say before we finish up, and it's a theme of this round, but Super Rugby this year it's the content's great, the action on the field is fantastic, but we have so much work as a game to do to get ourselves back in the plus. The fans throughout all games this weekend, the crowds were dismal. The Wellington game, there was much more yellow seats available than players than people in the crowd. There was not a game that I think was more than half full across the whole round. It's not just an Australian problem. The same problem's happening in New Zealand. Obviously, Fiji is its own thing. They sell out and go nuts for it. But Friday night after the rugby, I did a quick search through the channels. Channel 7 had AFL on, and it was I don't know who was playing or where it was being played, but it was full, packed to the brim for just a regular AFL round. Then we had the Roosters and the Rabbitohs playing on Channel 9. Both of those, mind you, were on free to air on a Friday night. And again, Allianz Stadium absolutely packed. We had the Waratahs there 2 weeks ago, and it was not even half full. Well, maybe 60% full, 70% full, but it wasn't nowhere near the amount of numbers that they wanted to get to. So we need to do a lot more. And I'm just saying this, again, it's the work that has to be put in to make our product more enticing for people to want to go and see it. Just having the game of rugby on isn't good enough at the moment, because we need to be looking at the other things off the field to engage people to come in. Speaking of that, before we finish up, Ando, Super W kicks off this weekend.
Mate, I cannot wait. I have already prepared to go out to the Waratahs women's game against the Chiefs. It's a doubleheader match, which is really exciting. So I'm going to be going out, making sure I get in there early for the women's kickoff at 5 o'clock. Beforehand, It's going to be awesome fun. I'm really, really keen.
If you are at the game and say hi, probably do a live, I'm sure what we'll do, but we'll be there early for the women's game, and then we've got the Waratahs men's game afterwards. But it's not just New South Wales that has the doubleheader. The Rebels women are playing as well. I think they play, I don't know, do you have the list in front of you? Who are they playing? But they're playing a doubleheader with the men down in Melbourne as well. So that's a fantastic, it's on Saturday, not Friday, but that's awesome as well. So if you are a Rebels fan based in Melbourne, do get along and support the Rebels women's team as well. I think they play the Reds.
Yep, get involved. It's going to be great. It's going to be great. So, thank you very much, everybody. It's been an absolute pleasure. Make sure you get amongst it for the Super W season kicking off this coming week, and we really, really appreciate all your support. Have a wonderful week, and we'll catch you next time. Bye.
Bye.